building wealth for ourselves is kind of anti-capitalist too, because we get to use that money to rest. We get to use that money to, become financially independent. We're getting out of this. We're getting out of what capitalistic society tells us, that we have to always be productive. We can't rest. And so when we get our money right, we can buy our time back and rest and do whatever we want.
Hey, journeyers. Welcome to the Journey to Launch podcast. This week we have two special guests, Israel and Sunem Tovar. They are two first-gen Latine siblings who empower people to use money to live their lives on their own terms. Israel built a six-figure net worth by the age of 26 on, guess what, teacher salary, and is a first-gen openly gay Latino. He earned a BA from Yale University and a master's in education from Stanford University. Sunem has built a 200,000 investment portfolio and holds a master in finance. First of all, I know your parents must be so proud of you. Look at you go. They've been featured in Business Insider, Entrepreneur, and more. And most notably, I met them at a conference that we both went to over the past, I guess, couple months, depending on when you listen to this, FinCon. And I just want to say it was a pleasure meeting the both of you, because Israel, you came up to me and you just had all this energy about listening to the podcast and how much it helped you. And I always say, you journeyers or people who follow the content don't understand how much it helps me when I meet you in the real world and in real life, because oftentimes it does feel like I'm talking to the ether. And I know people are there, but not everyone is as engaged, or I don't know. And I know I do that too, right? There are people that I really enjoy or love, but I don't always say something. I don't always follow them or comment on their things, but I enjoy them. And if they stopped creating content, I'd be like, wait, what happened? So I really appreciate the energy you gave me. And it's why when I thought about giving away what was called the bound copy of my books, the first printed copies, and I remembered, I'm like, wait, I was trying to give it to other creators who may want to interview me. I'm like, why they're cool too, but I'm like, why not give it to journeyers that I'm actually meeting, that are coming up to me, and let them get it first. And so that's why you were literally the first, I think I told you, the first person that I gave the bound printed copy of the book to. So I just want to say I appreciate you. And when I was thinking about, okay, let's take this further, and you reached out about coming on the podcast, I was like, of course, let's go. Let's talk more about your journey. So all that to say, it was so nice to meet you in person, and welcome to the Journey to Launch podcast.
Jamila, thank you so much for having us here. It's really giving a full circle moment, because when we went to FinCon for the first time a few months ago, whenever this podcast goes live, like meeting you was on our top priority. We were so lucky to get matched with Julian and Kirsten from Rich and Regular as our mentors, and they're like, "What can we do to help you?" We're like, "We want to meet Jamila." We want to meet her. That is on our priority list. So when we saw you, we were like, we need to go say hi to her. And so we both had all this excitement, because we've been listening to your podcast for 5 years. And Jamila, you played such a huge pivotal role in our financial journey and also entrepreneurship journey, right? Like I mentioned to you in person, I listened to your podcast. Well, I didn't mention these details, so I'll
Yeah.
share these details.
Yeah.
I listened to your podcast when I quit my first teaching job, and I realized that I had no financial literacy. I was still broke, even though I went to these really wealthy institutions, prestigious institutions. And our oldest sister shared an episode from your podcast, and I don't know how she found it, but bless her heart for finding it. And it was so humbling, because I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next, and I ended up going back to teaching, right? But I was delivering pizzas for Domino's, and I was working at a law firm part-time and teaching English online. And it was during that time period where I was binge listening to your podcast, while I was delivering pizza. And it just gave me so much inspiration. And then I ended up going back into the classroom, and I still was going through it, because teaching is a really hard profession. And I would wake up really early and listen to your podcast every Wednesday morning. And by listening to your podcast for the past 5 years, I think played a huge role in why I was able to build a six-figure net worth on a teacher salary by the age of 26, and why my sisters, Nem and I, began our entrepreneurship journey, because we saw someone who we can relate with, who comes from an immigrant background, who is just so authentic and organic and just incredible. So thank you so much. It's such an honor for us to be here.
Oh, well, I have to understand, and I'm sure everyone else listening too, as fellow journeyers, want to know more of your background. So both of you have accomplished a lot. And Israel, we can start with you in terms of going to school. You mentioned it just now. You went to a prestigious school. So from the outside looking in, it's like, wow, like check that off your resume. But what did that look like? What did that journey look like financially? And then, of course, Sunem, I'd love to learn more about your background and what you went through too in your early education.
Yeah, so I actually got full rides to both Yale and
Okay.
Stanford. Yeah, I did that.
Yes.
I finessed my way. Yes, I finessed my way into getting enough funding from scholarships to even covering most of my car loan when I was in graduate school. So definitely a huge, huge privilege. But even though, Jamila, like I mentioned before, even though I went to these institutions, like I still graduated as a first generation professional of color with no financial literacy. And so I went to school with folks who came from a lot of money, but I myself didn't have a lot of money. And so when I quit my first teaching job, that's when I realized, like, oh crap, I have no generational wealth. I have no financial literacy. Even though I went to these schools and got full rides, which is a huge privilege not to a graduate student debt, like I still had no generational wealth, right? So that was like the pivotal moment of me being like, okay, these institutions are not going to save me. My community, myself, are we're going to save ourselves.
So when you went to the schools, what did you think you were going to do, right? Because then a lot of people who go there, like they're thinking like business or investment banking or high paying jobs. Did you always want to be a teacher?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's such a good question. Yes, I think right now I'm kind of going through this metamorphosis phase where I'm kind of shifting my priorities a lot and interest. But all my life I wanted to be a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and I, in fact, Sunem, like when I was in second grade, I would want to play like teacher, and I would be like, Sunem, do you want to play with me? And she'd be like, no, I don't want to play with you. So I was that person who knew I wanted to be a teacher, and I taught English to undocumented Latino folks here in Nashville prior to going to college, and so I knew that I wanted to go into education when I was in college. But when I got to Yale, because of the same reasons that you mentioned, like most folks who go to the institutions tend to pursue more like prestigious, high paying careers. And so I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I interned on the Hill and the New York State Education Department. I just realized I wanted to be a teacher. And then I became a teacher, and I was like, whoa, this is wild. Like, it's so challenging, especially coming from my background and with my identities. Like, I was that teacher who would break up fights in the middle of the hallway. Like, I was the only openly gay Latino male educator that my students had. And so I was making a huge impact, but I was sacrificing my well-being. And that's why like listening to your podcast was so important, because it helped me realize that money can give me more options, right? Help money can give me um, options in my career and life, and I was able to do that and pivot from teaching. But yeah, long story short, I did want to be a teacher, and I got my master's in education from Stanford, and to become a teacher specifically.
And Sunem, what about you? By the way, who's the older sibling?
So I'm a year and a half older than him, but most people think he's older than me because
Yeah.
he's the one who talks
All right,
more.
and the
So
height
that's
because he's pretty tall. Okay, so
yeah, he
Sunem, what
is.
about you? Tell me a little bit about your educational background and what you thought you wanted to do.
Yeah, so I went to college. So I also got my college degree paid off, but I did get student loans. But I really didn't need them. I just got them because we're six in total. So our parents had six kids in total. And some of my other brothers, so we're the
Okay.
babies in the family. So some of my other brothers had gone to college and then got in student loans. And so I saw them like using their student loans to spend on things. So I was like, oh, I feel like I need to get student loans too so that I can spend on things. And so I got student loans even though I didn't need them. I knew nothing about that I had to pay them back and that I had to pay interest on them. And so when I went to school, I originally thought that I wanted to be a lawyer, immigrant parents, all the things that you know about. It's like being an
Yeah.
engineer, a lawyer, a doctor. And so I was like, I want to be a lawyer. But then I realized that I am too introverted to be a lawyer. I was like, I hate writing. I don't want to be speaking in public all the time. And so I was like, yeah, let me do something else. And so from when I graduated with about $16,000 in student debt. And then I decided to get a brand new car because everybody was telling me to get a brand new car. They're like, okay, well, you graduated, you're making some money. And at that point, I was making like less than $20,000. But I was like, okay, that's a lot of money, which is not. But during that time, I felt like that was a lot. And so I got me a car loan. And so my debt went up to $42,000. And then during that time, I was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just going to be paying off the minimum loan. And then I believe in around 2016, I started realizing that all my money went to pay off debt. And I was like, I'm like, something has to change. And so I went down the rabbit hole of like personal finance and I started getting so into it. So in 2016, when I started listening to it, like there wasn't really much podcasts. There was like mostly blogs. And so I would consume a lot of blogs. And so I was like, oh, I really like personal finance. Let me go back to school and put me to a master's program in
Mhm.
finance so that I can learn all of this. And don't do that. Like I was like, if I couldn't go back, I would tell myself, don't do that because I literally learned nothing about personal finance in my finance degree. It was all about like corporate finance. And I think I had like one or two classes to do with like investing, but by that time I had already learned all of that on my own. And so yeah, so I became debt free in 2019, thanks to like consuming all this personal finance. And I did start listening to your podcast too in 2018, at the same time as I started, because you know our sister shared it in this chat that we have with our siblings, and so I started like listening to that too. And then I started like realizing that like life is not just about becoming
Yeah.
debt free, and I realized that like you know you can take control of your life if you start investing and you want to become financially independent. And during this time in 2019, I was like working full time and going to school. And so I was really burnt out and I was like, I really want to become retired today. And so when I became debt free, I like pivoted to investing very aggressively. And because I realized the importance of investing, even though I got my master's in finance, like they didn't really teach me about the power of investing. It was just like, you know, how to value a stock and all of that. But when I learned, I was like, oh my God, I need this. And then, so, you know, I started to invest and then I told Israel how to invest. And for a while, Israel would not listen to me. He was like, no. But then when he quit his job, I think that's when he finally like started listening to me. And in fact, like, we usually share this story that's a little funny. When Israel first started his teaching job, he came up to me with his check. He was so upset because he's like, who's taking money for this
Yeah.
403B? What is this? And he was ready to fight someone. But then I was like, hey, Israel, it's actually for your retirement.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds definitely how most people feel when they start to invest because it's such a, you know, foreign concept. I mean, think about it for you too, because I also had a degree in business with a specialization in finance, but you don't learn about how to create wealth for yourself, right? You're learning more about like corporations and business structures. And I honestly think that's for a reason. They don't want you to know how to really build personal wealth. They want you to be indoctrinated into the system and keep you kind of on this cycle of working to for a paycheck to pay for your bills and, you know, get debt so you can stay within the system. So I'd love to know, Israel, in terms of your investing. So you said you were able to invest how much? Because what most people are not going to ask, right? Like, what did those teaching years look like? You know, if you want to share maybe the range of how much you were making and how did you create such a big portfolio based on your salary? Was it mostly because of how did you were you able to save money in certain areas? What are some hacks for other people listening who want to do that too?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, all of these different ideas and strategies came from your podcast, right? So thank you so much, Jamila, again. But I was making 45K when I moved to Nashville back in 2018. Um, and I also bought a house because that's what a lot of immigrants are socialized to believe, that owning a house is the only way to building wealth, right? Through real estate. And that's not, I don't believe that anymore.
Mm,
But that's what I believed then, even though I had access to Sunem, who was saying, no, that's not the that's not the only way. Like, like I wasn't ready for her advice until I bought the house and I went through the whole experience myself. I was not financially ready to buy that house, but I bought it, right? And so I did that, and then I started to um, invest. Once I quit my first teaching job, and then I got my side hustles, and then I went back to teaching. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to start investing more aggressively in my 401k, 403b. Right. So I started with 10%. And then I was like, I want to make more money. And I also want to live in a more progressive city. And so I ended up moving to DC, where I got a 15K salary increase. And I also was able to decrease my expenses. Even though the cost of living was higher there, I was able to decrease my expenses because I was able to live in the outskirts of the city with a really good friend from college. And we rented a house. It was four of us living there, and it was 3 bedrooms. And I split a room with my really good friend. And it worked out because she was a consultant at that time, and she was spending most of her time in California anyway. And so I was only paying $350 for rent, and I increased my salary by 15K. And then I was finessing, getting all the side hustles like the homework center and doing this club and working during the summers, and I was investing all of that money. And the school where I worked too was providing a 6% match to my 403b. So that made a huge impact, right? And so I was maxing out my 401, 403b, and I was then maxing out my IRA. And then the additional money I was also investing in a brokerage account. And then 2 years after living in DC, I decided I just didn't want to be a homeowner anymore. And because it was too challenging to be an ethical homeowner when I don't come from generational wealth, and there's so much to unpack there, right? But I ended up selling that house, and then I invested most of it to a brokerage account, and so I was able to build a six-figure net worth portfolio by doing all of that in that time span.
Right. I want to pull out some really, I think, great things that you were able to do. And I think house hacking, being able to get your rent or living expense that low is key. I know not everyone can do that, right? Depending on your responsibility and your age or how safe you feel, right? But luckily you had friends you could
Hmm.
trust and do that. And sometimes it does think you have to think out of the box and be creative, and it may require that you give up some comforts, but it's not something that you need to do permanently, right? It may be something you do for 2 years to get to a point where you can then have more freedom and flexibility. I also loved that you talked about getting that raise. So first you moved cities to high cost of living area, but then kept your
Hmm.
expenses low. And then even though you made more, you just invested that money. You didn't increase your lifestyle to be able to do that. Now, can
Hmm.
you imagine maybe, and I think this was what happens to a lot of people, is they already started this hamster wheel of making more, spending more, and it's harder to then scale back once you start doing that. It just takes more of an emotional and mental effort. But I think that's the beauty of if you're able to find this. Like some people are like, oh, like I'm finding this at a point in my life where I'm not making a lot of money or I have a lot of debt. And I just feel like if you can understand these concepts now, that way when you do make more money, you can then apply it. So it's not necessarily a horrible thing if you're not in the position to start saving aggressively, but you know about this so that you can get in that position, or when you get there, you can do it.
Exactly. Yes. I don't think I would ever do that now, right? Like, in fact, I live by myself, and even though like cost of living has increased everywhere and inflation, but like I I need to live by myself now, but I laid a strong financial foundation for myself and did those sacrifices then so I can have that now, right? And I don't regret doing that. But like you said, I knew that it was only temporary, and I don't think I'll do that in the future if I don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Sunam, what about you and investing? What was like, how did you start, or what were the things that you were able to do to get you to this place of investing so much?
Yeah, so something that helped me when it comes to investing is, so I have a partner, so I think that's also been really helpful because I know like there's the single tax when you're by yourself, it's like more expensive because both of you, like only one person pays
Yeah.
for the rent. And so I think that was also helpful. And also what helped me was that I did live with my parents until I was like 23. And so during that time when I was paying off debt, like that was really helpful. Of course, like, so if you're like young and you're like, I want to become debt free, I think it's also good that you like take advantage of those privilege, that if your parents let you live there, then go ahead and take advantage. But I mean,
Yeah.
some people do say they're like, oh well, sometimes you do have to either pay like in mental health, because sometimes it's not
Right.
the greatest to live with your parents. But I mean, if you can be okay with that, then yeah, definitely do that. And so something for me that helped was that I got out of college, and then I started doing, I had a lot of little like side hustles. So I was managing a storage facility. I was managing actually two storage facilities. And then I got a job, another job. And so I was able to, I think my job was only paying me like $45,000, but then I was making like $30,000 managing the storage facilities. And then I also did a lot of web design. So I had a lot of side
Hmm.
hustles. And so I think having all of that like really helped me pay off my debt. And originally, when I ran the numbers, I was supposed to become debt free in 2021, but I actually was able to achieve it in 2019 because of all the side hustles that I had. And I was doing too much. I was hustling a lot. And I understand there is a period of time in your life where you have to, because when you don't come from generational wealth and your parents can't help you out, that is something that's going to happen. And so I was hustling a lot. And so um, once I became debt free, I just pivoted to investing. And because I was already so used to spending so little, I like just took that amount and started investing very aggressively, which helped me like achieve 100,000 dollars in the stock market in 2020. And then now I have over $250,000 in the stock market, because I am still investing, but I'm no longer investing as
Mm.
aggressive as I was in the beginning. Because, like I said, there's a time in your journey where you do want to, you do have to be aggressive. But now I'm not, because now I'm practicing being more balanced with my life. Because now that I do have all of this money that I have accumulated, I'm trying to use it as a tool to live a life that I love. And so for the longest, I used to have to be in an office that I hated to go to. I had to drive 40 minutes, which I know it's not a lot compared to how much you used to drive, Jamila, but it was still a lot for me. And so I hated being there. And then because I started thinking about like money is a tool to use, I was like, how can I make my life better? And so I was able to negotiate with my job to only work 4 days a week and work remotely. And I started doing that in 2022, and I actually love it. And now I get to like travel every month. I was in New Orleans and in Arizona. So I've been into so many different places just because I was able to change my mindset from thinking that money was a thing for me to hoard,
Mm.
to using it as something that I can use to live a better life.
Yeah. And I think what you just said, like there's a time in your journey where it does require hard work. I don't know if it's a just more definitely it's a mindset thing. I think with social media, and I'm assuming I'm a bit older than you guys too. So I feel like I put in the work. So somebody may see me now and say like, "Oh, like you're able to quote unquote have it all." But there was a time in my life when I was more in hustle mode. And it's not that I'm advocating that people hustle to the point of exhaustion or burnout, but I just feel like most, if we're being realistic about the people who are able to break through kind of this beginner journeyer stage, as I talk about, like, whether you're a what I call explorer trying to just get to stability or trying to get out of debt, there is a moment of or you need to sacrifice and do more work in those stages to get to a certain point, but it doesn't have to be forever. And I think so many people see, especially younger people, like maybe the fruits of what you've done, right? So they hear like, oh, you saved how much, or you're able to now work from home, and or see me and say, wow, like she was able to quit her job, but it's like you had to do some work to get to that, to lay that foundation to do that. And I think most people don't recognize
Yeah.
the where they are in the journey yet, and so they think like, oh, I can do that now, and it's like, well, you could, but you may struggle a bit longer if you do it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, like, especially when you come from like a first gen like immigrant household, right? When you don't come from generational wealth, like those sacrifices are even more um like you tend to do those sacrifices because you don't have folks helping you, right? And people have asked me, would you do it all over again? Would you hustle? And I say yes. You know, it wasn't fun, right? But I will do it all over again because the financial foundation that I have built for myself has given me way more options in my career and my life, right? It has allowed building that wealth has allowed me to ask myself different questions, right, on how I want to live my life. It's allowed me to reject jobs. It's allowed me to pivot careers. It's given me so much more power. And getting that power as a first gen professional is so revolutionary from my perspective. And so I feel like I would do it all over again. But now that I do have that strong financial foundation like Sunem, I think we are kind of having a more balanced approach to building
Mm-hmm.
wealth, right? And we are also trying to move away from scarcity money mindset because I feel like that's something that we really struggled with growing up in poverty, right? And I think part of the reason why we also were able to build such strong financial foundations for ourselves was because we were trying to get out of poverty, right? But now we have to remind ourselves that we're not in poverty anymore and that we have a foundation that has giving that allows us to embrace abundance and allows us to pursue lives that are more that we can rest more and experience more joy and shift, like Sanam said, our this mindset of seeing money as something to be accumulated to as a tool that we can leverage to live our best lives, whatever that looks like for you.
Talk a little bit more about like your family. So you said there's six of you, and how maybe your parents feel or felt about you not pursuing the traditional like immigrant, what they would say they'd want you for to have as a career. You know, do they see now? Because sometimes when you're in the moment doing it, they're just like, oh, why are you choosing this path? Or why'd you quit that job? It had stability. But do they now see what that was like, the benefit of it? And then how would you say like your siblings, like I know you said your older sister told you about the podcast, but do you feel like your position as like first gen immigrants or having so many, because I'm sure I didn't discuss where your family is from, but how much now is it that you have family that are looking maybe to you for advice or even monetary help? How do you create those conversations in your family or even boundaries so that you guys are okay financially but then still potentially helping family out?
Mhm. So we grew up in Tijuana. So Israel was born in Tijuana, Mexico, and then I was born in LA, but I also lived in Tijuana. And then we relocated from Tijuana to LA when I think I was like 6 and Israel was 4, and then we moved to Nashville. So well, now I live in Nashville. Israel lives in Nashville, but he's trying to move somewhere else. but but yeah, so when we so our parents, they I feel like our parents are pretty proud of us. um I for the longest my mom did want one of us to be like a lawyer or a doctor or engineer, but I feel that what we are pursuing has been good for her. My parents, like they have been really great at like being happy and supporting us in our journey. I mean, at least that's what I feel like. I don't know about Israel. um, but to answer your question about our siblings, so we actually have like a chat where our all our siblings talk to each other, and so since me and Israel started getting so into like personal finance and talking to everyone, we talk to all our siblings about investing. And in fact, one of our older brothers, who's like 2 years older than me, he just recently reached 100K in the stock market this year. And he started investing in 2020 when we started talking to him about it. And then our sister, she's also investing, the one who showed us your
Yeah.
podcast. She's also investing, and so, yeah, I think most of our siblings are investing, and they usually come to us for questions when they're like, "Hey, what should I invest in? Should I open up this card?" And something for us, because we are Latinos, like we grew up in like a collectivist family. Like we want to build wealth with our family, because what's the point of us being wealthy and our family not? Like I want all of us to be able to become financially independent, work optional, and not have to work, so that we can go on trips
Yeah.
together. And so we're really happy about sharing this knowledge
All right,
with
I have to
them.
ask, as someone who has kids, and I'm just like, I love seeing adult sibling relationships. That is my, I'm pretty cool and close to my siblings, and we didn't grow up all in the same household. I'm also a lot older than my sister from my mom, and then I have a bunch of siblings from my dad. But I love that are still all able to have a connection. And now raising kids within the same household, only 2 years apart, all three of my kids. And I'm just like, my goal, I just want them to continue to remain connected as adults. And so I just love when I meet adult siblings that choose to spend time with each other. So my next question is there like was there a value system within your household growing up that your parents instilled in you to help enforce this as adults, even what seems like this ability to share with each other and to learn from each other? And I'm not saying that you probably don't have like issues, right, like all siblings do behind the scenes, but what would you say, so then as someone who's like wants to have a closer relationship with their siblings and talk about investing and bring them on the path with them or about wealth, is that something that had to be talked about as children, or what were the value systems that you got from that? And then how as adults can you encourage your family members to get on the path with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I just want your audience to know, Jamila, when Sunem and I do have issues, it's because she starts it and not me. Okay. Like I never start any of the
Of
issues. It's
course.
always her. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I am just kidding. That is a really good question, Jamila. And I really do think that it's very much ingrained in a Latino like
Mm,
collectivist culture that we're so family oriented. I'm not sure exactly what our parents or family did to for us to be so close. But I just know that like for me, even like I was the only one who left home for college. Like most of my siblings who went to college went to state schools. And for me, going away for college was really good for me to explore the world, and get to know myself better. But would always come back to visit my family. Like I would always come back to like every time I had a break, I would come back to visit my family. And even today, like I stay coming back to Nashville. I always say I stay coming back to dusty Nashville because of my family, like because of my family. And it's like I don't know exactly what our parents did. I just know that it's very
mm,
much part of the Latino culture, and it's not just specific to our family, right? Like I know, for example, like um, when I being first gen and being the only one who went away for college, my mom was really really sad that I went away for college. In fact, she would make me text her every morning and call her every night, and she would often ask me, when are you going to transfer to a local university, right? Because it's just like your kids just don't leave you, right? Your
mm,
kids only leave you when they get married, and that's it, right? When they get
mm,
married, right, or whatever, like they just don't leave you. And so I think the fact that now that I think about it, is I think my mom was also really present, like throughout our lives. Like my dad was the one who went out to work really hard to get the money, and my mom was working really hard in the household. But I think because we had the privilege of having our mom there, um, I think that also played a huge role in how we are able to really value family. But those are my initial thoughts. Do you have any other thoughts, Sinem?
Yeah, I think it has to do with my mom. She always made sure that we stay connected. In fact, like she still calls
Mm,
both of us like every day.
mhm,
Because so my parents recently retired and they relocated to Tijuana, Mexico. So they moved back, and so my mom, when she goes to Tijuana, she usually calls us like
mm,
every day, and I think because she's like really trying to build that connection with us, which is why we have like grown up being very connected. But to answer your question about how we started talking to each other about money, so I feel like sometimes your siblings are not gonna want you to talk about money. They're not gonna want to take the advice that you give them. And I just say, like, it's okay. Just keep on telling them. Eventually, when they get to a place to receive it, they will receive it. And so that's what something that I did when I was talking to Israel. Like, he was not willing to receive it for a while. And then finally, he was. And now he's so passionate about talking about this too. And so I think, like I said, like if you have siblings, just try and show also like show them your
mm,
numbers. That's been very powerful. Like
Mhm.
when I've shown my brothers my investment numbers,
Mhm.
like how much I have in the stock market, they're like, "Oh my God, you did that. Like if you can do it, we grew up in the same household. I can do that too. Can you teach
Yeah, I
me?"
think definitely showing, because so much of it feels invisible or fake, right? Like it's on paper or it's not real or it's not money you can actually touch. So you have to make it real for people. And then imagine someone like you literally grew up with, and they're showing you like, I have $50,000 in my investment account. You may not have anything because you didn't start.
Mhm.
I would think that would encourage you to be like, wait a second, like let me start doing something. Um, Israel, you talk about, home ownership. And I think it's so interesting. So as you said, like looking back on it, maybe it wasn't for you, you weren't ready. But then it looks like selling your home did give you a boost, right? It allowed you to make some headway with your finances. And I often find that's the case for people where, maybe if you knew what you knew, you'd do things differently. But if you did things differently, you wouldn't be where you are because it helped. So for people
Mhm. Mhm.
considering home ownership right now or wanting to have a home and invest in real estate, what are some things that you wish you did know that you would have done differently, and any other things? So I love how you just mentioned also home ownership as it being ethical. So we can talk about that after you answer the first question.
Yes, that's a great. I have a lot of hot takes on
Yeah,
home ownership,
let's
Jamila, but
go.
I won't share them
No,
all
we
on
could
this
go.
podcast.
We can share
I'm
them.
just gonna share some. I think the main piece is that we need to approach home ownership with
Mm,
intentionality, right? And in order for you to become intentional, I think it's like deepening your financial literacy, right? Getting to know yourself more, and then connecting your financial literacy to who you are and what you want from your life, right? I think those are two main pieces because a lot of folks, especially if you come from an immigrant or first gen background, like a lot of folks are socialized, like I was mentioning, to believe that homeownership is the only way to build wealth, right? Because that's what was instilled in us, right? And that stems from that socialization piece, but also from a lack of financial literacy, right? And so for me, that was definitely the case. And now knowing myself better, like I know I'm a free spirit. I love to bop around, like I've had the huge privilege of living in so many parts of the country and the world. And I want to continue to do that. And that's just who I am. And I feel like me being a homeowner in this stage of my life, and especially because I bought that house when I was 23 years old.
mhm.
I'm 28 now, right? When I was 23 years old, like I learned a lot from that experience that I wouldn't give back. But it was also a really hard experience because I didn't have money to replace the roof when I had to replace it, right? I just didn't know all the pressures that came with homeownership. And then I was like, oh, well, I'll just rent it. And then when I did rent it, I'm like, oh, it's hard to rent it, right? Especially because I wanted to be an ethical landlord. I wanted to rent out to Black folks, to brown folks, immigrants, queer people, right? And then when COVID hit, people couldn't pay, and I was like, it's okay, don't pay, but I only got $2 in my bank account. So I'm like, what's going on? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's going on? So I decided to sell it because I realized that for me it just didn't fit with my lifestyle, with my values. Like investing in index funds fit much better for me because it's like, if I invest in index funds, I can build wealth through that, and I can still bop around, right? And I don't have to grapple with these tensions of being, am I going to be a home, am I going to be an ethical landlord, right? Am I going to come back to Nashville? Am I gonna? I don't have to deal with any of that now. Like, I think that if I were to buy property again, one, I don't think I want to buy property in the U.S. I think I want to buy property in Mexico. Um, I think that like that experience, as hard as it was, I think it taught me so much that I wouldn't give back those lessons, right? But I implore folks to please approach your homeownership journey with intentionality, right? Just don't do it because you feel like that's what you need to do.
Yeah, it's such an important and great almost exclamation that you have to put. Like, think through the numbers when you are considering buying property, because also I think this idea of it being physical, and I love real estate too because it's physical. You can walk, you can see it, you can, it's also helps your ego, right? Like, I own a home, I own multiple homes. There's
Mhm,
like a lot that goes
mhm,
along with that people want to have and say, but you can build wealth,
mhm,
and this is why financial independence and the concept grabbed me when I first heard it. And I'm assuming probably what helped you like get on board was when I was like, wait, regular people are just investing like in retirement accounts and taxable accounts. And yes, it takes longer. It's a slower burn, but it's almost fail proof as long as you're a long term investor that you can invest your income to gain wealth. And I think that's something that I just want more people to understand about wealth. It looks different. This type of wealth, it's more covert, it's not as loud, but the fact that you can move around or that you can travel or have the options that you guys have, like that's real. That's wealth. That's that generational wealth you're going to eventually be able to pass down to people in your family.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, a lot of people, when they just think about wealth, is like a house, but also like wealth can be like building wealth is like through the stock market, through a business, and through
Yeah.
real estate. Like you can
And
have you can build wealth using all three of those. Or if you're like, actually, I just want to do one, then yeah. And it doesn't have to be like maybe right now, like someone can start off like building wealth through the stock market because that's all they can afford to do. But later on in the future, they're like, oh, I actually want to be a real estate investor, and you can do that too. And also, you can be a real estate investor through the stock market too.
mm-hmm.
FYI.
And doing it ethically. I think that you brought up a good point, Israel, like in terms of wanting to be fair, because a lot of people, when they talk about real estate and flipping houses and all that, like it's really done in a way where it's not really given. You're not like, are you really thinking about the community and who can afford those houses? And so I think
Mm-hmm.
in general, this whole system, participating in it, this capitalist system, there's just a lot
Mm-hmm.
that you have to either come to terms with. And it's like, you can't necessarily, it's not 100%. I don't know, not going to say 100% ethical, but like just investing in the companies we invest in, even in the index fund, right? Like some of those companies that we
Mm-hmm.
are participating in are not all great. A lot of them aren't. But the option though is,
Mm-hmm.
until we can figure this out as a society, we can't just sit on the sidelines either and not build wealth, because at least if we have something, we do have some say. The more money you have, unfortunately, the more power you have. And so we need to, as immigrants, we need to, as brown people, as queer people, build wealth so that we can have a say and have some influence, and not and just not like sit on the sidelines.
Absolutely great. And I have lots of hot
Yeah.
takes, especially about
Yeah.
capitalism too, but I'll just share a couple on here. But absolutely, I feel like under capitalism, money equates directly to power, right?
Mhm.
Power, whether that's political power, options to give you more power to quit a job, to have more flexibility in your life. It's power, right? And so that's why we're so passionate about teaching folks how to learn the language of money and get their money right so they can have more power in the society. And because of capitalism, right? And the thing about investing in the real estate market is that, like, I always share this, like, these corporations are making money off the backs of our folks, right? You don't you when you go to Walmart, you see low income Black and brown folks working, right? You see low income folks, but then the people who are getting the profits are the rich white men, right? And so you investing in the stock market is you reclaiming the money that we rightfully deserve. That is our money. Our communities are making that money. If you look at the history of the U.S. as a former history teacher, like immigrants, Black folks, indigenous folks, we built the wealth of this country, and we built arguably the global economy, right? Black folks were commodified as property, right? And so a Black person owning property in the US is so freaking revolution, it's so powerful, right? Indigenous folks, like the European colonizers stole the lands of indigenous folks. So like an indigenous person owning property, that's powerful. And so building wealth is kind of also reclaiming what's rightfully ours as marginalized people, right? And it's reclaiming and also gaining more power in a capitalistic society. So we definitely need to get our money right and build wealth as people who come from these communities.
And something else that we say is that like building wealth for ourselves is kind of anti-capitalist too, because we get to use that money to rest. We get to use that money to, become financially independent. We're getting out of this. We're getting out of what capitalistic society tells us, that we have to always be productive. We can't rest. And so like when we get our money right, we can buy our time back and rest and like do whatever we
Mhm.
want without having to always be in this like this thing that, oh, I need to make more money, I need to be more productive, I need to accomplish all of this and this, that, the world teaches us that we have to, but we do not have to.
Where are you guys now with your careers? What are your aspirations in terms of your job slash maybe entrepreneurship? What's going on there?
Yeah, so for me is so right now I work remotely 4 days a week. I love it. I still do want to become financially independent. My goal is to become financially independent at age 45. Um, and so I mean, I can get there sooner, but I have really tried to reach this in a balanced way and make sure that I am enjoying my journey right now, because I realized in 2022 when I reached 100K that even though I had built this big milestone, as a first gen Latina, who came from poverty, like I was not happy. Like I was really anxious during that time. And it was because, like I was just trying to accumulate money because of my money scarcity. And so during that time, like I decided to pivot. I'm like, no, I want to make sure that I am still pursuing financial independence, but doing it in a balanced way and enjoying my life. And I am honestly like really enjoying it right now.
For me, Jamila, so I also took a sabbatical when I left the classroom from July 2022 to February of 2023. And taking that sabbatical literally changed my life. My life, I had been really highly productive, really high achieving. I really extracted a lot of joy from advancing social justice for our communities, teaching, low income Black and Brown kids, and doing all this work. But when I was in my sabbatical, it was the first time ever that I wasn't doing anything. And that I just realized that I extracted more happiness, I had more peace by not doing anything. And I started working full time again in February because I was recruited to this brand new fintech startup in the South, and I've been working full time again for like 9 months now, and it's still been so hard, Jamila.
Mm.
So my goal is to be able to retire as soon as possible. I wish I had retired yesterday, but I still, I can't. um, but is this tension of like, I want to retire as soon as possible, but I also want to have a balanced approach, right? So how can I win the lottery,
Right.
right? Like, so how
Well,
can I win the lottery? So, so I can just retire tomorrow and not have to work. It's been a challenge. And so even though like we are still really committed to helping folks, and I think we're always going to be committed to helping folks use money to live life on their own terms. Like we just don't believe in work anymore. And I think Sunem and I both share this value that like we just want to live our lives on our own terms, whatever that looks like. And work a 40 work week, a 30 work week, hour work week is just not going to cut it for us.
right. Well, I think let's talk about that tension because I know a lot of people are feeling that no matter where you are, so it sounds like you both are in a place, what I call the five journeyer stages, like either the aviator stage or work flexible stage, but meaning like you are now diverting a lot of your money into investing because you no longer have to worry about paying off consumer debt. And so now it becomes, and when you get to this third stage, so there's five stages. I talk about all of this in the book, but there's five stages to reach financial independence. And the first two stages are more about, okay, getting to stability. Second stage is getting out of consumer debt. And then you reach these later stages, the aviator stage where you're building financial security so you're able to invest. Then the fourth stage is reaching work flexibility. So you can take time off of work, you can take breaks, you can travel, but it doesn't mean you never work again. You still have to bring in some income at some point. And then the final stage, financial independence. And I feel like for a lot of people, whether they're in the beginning or the later stage, it is this tension of, well, I can, if I spend less or I need less, then I can reach my financial goals sooner, right? Like for me, yeah, if we like reduced our expenses, we can be at a point where I wouldn't have to work anymore myself, like completely. But I don't want to do that. I want to enjoy my life. I want to like still take trips and live this more balanced approach. So then it sounds like you found a job or you found this work schedule that works for now, right? And for you, Israel, it sounds like it's like finding out like how can you get to a point where it's like it's not the job that I want to have forever, but it's a job that like I feel like I'm contributing something to the world, or at least I'm happy, but gives me my freedom. So, any thoughts or advice for people right now who are just like, well, I don't even know because yeah, I want to reach my financial goals, but I also want to have a nice car, or I also want to travel. And why do I have to? I hate that I have to choose both. Like, I don't know. I know it's not like a definite answer we can give people, but let's talk through maybe what that tension looks like.
Yeah, I can answer
Yeah.
that question. So something that I always ask myself is like, first, like you have to be intentional with the way you spend your money. You need to know what actually brings you joy and what doesn't, so that like you can cut out like the things that you don't really
Mm-hmm.
care for. So for example, something that has brought me joy and that I was willing to reduce my investments, because I used to invest like 50% or 60% of my income, was when I was like, okay, well, what brings me joy? And for me, that was travel, food, and then skincare. Now I've gotten into skincare, but like, so I'm like willing to spend money on this. And for me, that's worth like still working until I'm 45. But if I had a job that I hated, I would be like, I mean, I love skincare, but I don't think it's worth me being in this job that I hate. So I'm going to reduce that. So I think it's just being very intentional with your spending, being very intentional with the type of person you are and what are your values, what brings you joy when you're spending money.
Yeah, I think for me, I think this tension is even more on like up in my face because I took my sabbatical and I experienced freedom
Got a
for
taste
those
of
eight
it. Yeah.
months that it's been hard to, I got a taste of it and I want it back, I want it back. And I just don't want it for 8 months. I want it forever. And so I think this tension, because Sunem also wanted to take a sabbatical, and then she saw me living my best life, and she's like, "I'm definitely gonna take a sabbatical." But then she saw me going back to full time work, and she's like, "I'm definitely not gonna take a sabbatical anytime soon until I have reached my financial goals."
Yes, yes. So that's why it's so nice to like, to have a community of people who are doing things that you want to do, so that you can go and ask them, hey, how was this? Like, how does it impact your journey? Or like, how do you feel? And so, yeah, like I wanted to take a sabbatical, but when he came back, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I want to. I mean, my job is not horrible. Like, I have a lot of flexibility. I'm willing to like think about taking a sabbatical in the next 5 years or so, once I reach half a million in my investments.
Yeah. So I think for me, I've been struggling with this tension because of that beautiful experience. It's a blessing and a curse for me. But I think like literally I had a therapy session today and was exploring this, it's like I'm nervous, like I do want to move abroad. I want to move to Mexico soon. And I do want a fully remote job because I think that like for me, like having like a stable paycheck is really important. And I do want to reach financial independence, but I'm just nervous that I won't be able to like do it because I just don't want to work at all anymore. Right. And so like through therapy, I think I've been trying to get to know myself more and trying to figure out like what are the different priorities in my life? Like what are the non-negotiables? What are my needs? Right. Like personally, spiritually, geographically, everything. And once I figure that out, how does money fit into that? Right. And then how does work fit into that? Right. And so I think it's kind of like a self personal journey, right? For me to figure out those things before I can be like, okay, well, maybe I'm only going to work 15 hours a week and I'm going to find a job that pays me really well for those 15 hours, or maybe I'm going to move to a different place that I'm able to save money. So it's very much like a self-discovery journey that I'm going through right currently. And so unfortunately I can't really be as
No,
helpful as them
it's
because I'm kind of like in
but
the
I feel like so
the
many people feel
struggle
that
of
way.
it.
So many people, it's a real feeling of what do I want, which is why I feel like, and I know the financial independence journey, it's almost just like it presents itself as this outward journey to these very much tangible counting the number or counting the dollars and looking at the accounts, and it's all this doing. But I think honestly, it's really why I want everyone to go on it, is because it's not about the amount of money you accumulate at the end of it all or how much money you pay off in debt,
Mm-hmm.
because that will happen, right? Like that is going to happen once you start this journey, but it's the inward journey it's going to require of you,
Mm-hmm.
because you will begin, or you're going to need to begin to ask yourself better questions about your life, about what's worth it to
Mm-hmm.
you. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to force you to reckon with the life you created and the life you say you want. And I don't think necessarily that, I don't know, I just don't think anyone, and I'm not being pessimistic when I say this, I don't think that anyone is going to be 100% have it figured out or happy 100% of the time. Even the people who
Mm-hmm.
have all the money, even the people who are financially independent, like they're
Mm-hmm.
still us. Like we're still like complete humans with our
Mm-hmm.
emotions and feelings and everything. And so I just think, I don't think that the journey stops. I think maybe the numbers you might like check off that you did something, like you have 100,000. Even if when you reach the 500,000, like there's all this internal work that happens, and I think it's just ongoing. But the sooner that you can understand that the journey is a lot of inward of stuff, like it's a lot of intangible things, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what will help you realize, or at least not be so hard on yourself for not having it all figured out.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It really does. The journey, like when you start on like this journey of becoming financial independent, it really does
Mm-hmm.
change you, and in a good way, because you, like Israel said, like you start asking yourself all these questions that you didn't before, and also like I think we're in this point of asking ourselves these questions because both me and Israel have reached close to
Yeah.
five, which means that we our traditional retirement at 65, I think 60 is already set, and so we want to know what we
The
want to
rest of the
do
time,
for
right?
those years until we actually, and like do we really want to like we also like also ask ourselves some questions like do we want to keep on pursuing financial independence and like reach it at 45, or like I said, like do I just want to take a job that's and work 15 hours and maybe reach it when I'm 60 because my traditional retirement is already set.
Yeah. Yeah. These are all, oh my gosh, such great reflection questions. And I want you guys to like let people know where they can find out more about your work, you know, what you're going to be up to over the next few months, and yeah, where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, so we recently pivoted from being the Dream Teacher Project, where we provided anti racist, culture responsive financial literacy to teachers of color, to just focusing on our platform of Money Noticias podcast. We made that pivot because we want to foster a community of like minded people who are, committed to getting our money right and taking control of our lives. And so on our Money Noticias podcast, we spill all the tea about money as that relates to being anti racist and anti capitalist and living our best lives. So you can find us on IG at the Money Noticias podcast or on your favorite podcast platform if you want to listen to our podcast. We also do have a free money guide, 6 strategies to take control of your debt. If you're interested in that, you can download that in our link in our IG account.
And also like make sure to follow us on IG because I do share all the numbers when I travel. So like if you're wanting to know all the tea on how much I spend when I travel, because I feel like I literally travel every month now. I share all of those, and then we share a lot of the behind the scenes.
Yeah. So if you want to know, like, where is Israel going to end up? How is his, self discovery journey going on? Like, follow us on on IG and in the podcast because we share all of that there.
Right. And say the IG one more time where they can follow you.
So it's Money Noticias podcast.
Right. And so if you're listening to this and you got value or you enjoyed it, take a screenshot. I always say take a screenshot, tag us, tag me at Journey to Launch so we know that you were listening. And yeah, let's follow them on their journey. I'm so happy to have met you guys. And I can't just wait to see how your journey continues to unfold.
Oh, thank you so much, Jamila. It was such an honor to be here with you today.